Welcome to the Line Movement MMA betting show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle, joined now by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today, we're going to be talking UFC 258 because Kamaru Usman is defending the title against his former teammate and the number one contender, Gilbert Burns. And man, Dan Tom, this is one hell of a matchup. It's really about the pace of Kamaru Usman versus the high-level jiu-jitsu and the one-punch knockout power of Gilbert Burns.
Yeah, man, this is great. We're back for a fight week. This is a great matchup. It's friends discussing fights, me and you, Dan, and we're discussing a fight between friends, right? All we need is the maybe a shout out to our producer, Jordan. Maybe we just need a little bit of a clap on the intro music, and here we are. The difference is, Dan, is that me and you can break down these fights, and whether we're on the same side or the opposite side, it really doesn't matter. Whereas these guys, they're fighting for some serious high stakes and keywords. They're fighting. They're not picking fights. They are fighting. And when you have two former training partners, you get a big X factor, which I'm excited to kind of, peel back with you here today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, listen, everyone I know from that gym, Dan Tom, has kept their mouth shut. Everybody's got their lips sealed. So no one's letting anybody know about how those sparring sessions went down because I wanted to know firsthand, Dan Tom. And I asked not just one person, I asked multiple people from that gym. And no one said a damn thing. So, man, I'm very curious what happened. But as you know, the gym and the fight are two different things. And one thing I want to bring to the table, I gotta use stats for this one, man. You see the kind of numbers Kamaru Usman's putting up these days? I mean, 130 strikes landed against Rafael dos Anjos, 141 strikes landed against Tyron Woodley, 175 strikes landed against Colby Covington, and 94 strikes landed against Jorge Masvidal. The most strikes that Gilbert Burns ever landed in a UFC fight was actually his most recent fight against Tyron Woodley. And that was at 83 strikes, which is significantly less than anything Kamaru does. Kamaru basically doubles him up on strikes. So I think it's really going to come down to, can Gilbert Burns have that fight-changing moment where he drops him, where he wobbles him, where he rocks him, maybe a takedown or two, take his back. He has been submitted before, and have those kind of moments sway the judges to his favor.
Absolutely. I like that breakdown. And yeah, you can't deny the stats here. I mean, they're really easy to look at on paper, but when you really actually look at the whole sample size within context of Kamaru Usman, it translates and comes out the other side clean, my friends. So no hate from me on that aspect. And I really like that breakdown of the fight. Gilbert Burns is going to need moments. And I do believe that he is a live dog. Is he livelier than the price tag? I believe maybe in the neighborhood of plus 240 at the time of this recording, folks. I think so. I think he could be. I, of course, came in even leaning toward Burns because, of those inklings and X factors and intangibles. But as you know, Dan, and as many of our audience, I'm sure, knows by now, for better or for worse, I'm a bit of a slave to the stylistic matchups and, the technical aspect of things. However, if I'm reading the tea leaves, so to speak, and again, I'd be lying if I said I didn't use my connections too as well, Dan. We both know this. We both share information publicly and behind the scenes. So I'm not hating, but part of me from the gym side of things, it is nice to see the gym code being respected there. So not that I'd love to see you or I get shut down on information, but it's nice to see the gym code respected. But my interpretation, Dan, and perhaps you tell me where you're at, is the X's and O's that I get hung up on. I think do favor Usman as the odds, portend, which we could talk about here in a second. But as far as the X factors, which I want your opinion on, I know you said you weren't able to get any firsthand information, but Dan, you have a good set of eyes on you yourself, so we love your opinion. But to me, when I hear their interviews and the way they discuss training, and I know they both had coach first roles, Usman with wrestling on Tough, Gilbert Burns with the building of Black Zillions being brought in by Vitor Belfort for jiu-jitsu. So they both had those kind of mentor roles as well as the teammate role, right? But when I read the interviews, I almost feel like the underdog might have gotten the better of the sessions when I listen to them both talk. I know that's just conjecture. I have no way of proving that, folks. That's just my opinion. What do you have any read at all, Dan?
That's funny you bring that up because I was recently watching a Gilbert Burns interview, and he mentioned how Kamaru knows I can submit him, So basically what he's saying is that he submitted Kamaru multiple times. What I take from that is we don't know if it was in the gi, which if it was in the gi, then I fully expect Gilbert Burns to submit him multiple times. Or was it during MMA practice? So he didn't specify those details, which is kind of, what I got to know. But at the same time, the fight is completely different than two training partners trying to get each other better, which is probably what was happening. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm sure the sparring sessions were intense. They were competitive, but you're not trying to knock your sparring partners out. So you're trying to get each other better, which the difference is on Saturday night, these two are going to try to finish each other. And, you're going to have the ref, pull the winner off most likely, unless it hits the scorecards.
Absolutely. The gym is much different than fights. We've seen it at the highest level. We've seen it from longtime veterans of the sport. Some of my favorite guys, it's not trying to hate. I'm a big Mike Pyle fan, but he's a common name, right? Would just wreck guys at Extreme Couture. Like the who's who of training at Extreme Couture of the days, by the way. Wrecking guys above his weight class. Debuted in Rampage Jackson, in Tennessee. But it was different once they got there. And if we're going by the facts of what we do know, when it comes to game day, Kamaru, except for one time early on in his career, he shows up to perform. And the numbers are impressive that you mentioned, Dan. But the reason why they're more impressive to me is that when you see a guy so well built, literally, and just from a technical and tactical perspective, the things he does, there's got to be some kind of a hole in the armor somewhere, right, Dan? There's just got to be. And a lot of times, especially with that Rogan narrative, we're like, oh, the muscular athlete guy, maybe he's going to tire. But the numbers that you cited off the top of this breakdown and what we've obviously seen when you put the numbers in context, I don't really see the guy get tired. I don't really see the guy get hurt. So he's going to have to give up a bad position. And I don't doubt that Gilbert Burns submitted him a bunch of times in practice. But in practice, you're working positional grappling. Like you said, not only are you trying to get better, so the intensity levels are different, you're more welcoming, but you'll start on certain positions. Like, I've been able to get some decent guys' backs maybe back in the day, but those were positional rounds where we were already starting from an advantageous position. You know what I'm saying? You do that in MMA. You're not going, all right, we're going to start this like a fight because there's too many guys. There's not enough mat space, even at the super gyms, and guys are going to run into each other. They're going to hurt knees. So it's actually really counterintuitive to train as a fight. You don't really get those sparring sessions that often. Most of those are positional looks. So I wouldn't read too far into it. That being said, I still do believe that Gilbert Burns may have gotten the better of those sessions, but I'm still going to ultimately side with Usman here, Dan. Because again, back to the X's and O's and how it filters in is that I believe those things were positionally, and even though that Gilbert Burns is the more potent and varied fighter on the feet, he's the more dangerous submission fighter on the floor. I don't think anybody can argue those. You can argue a bit on the feet, sure, but I don't think you can argue that general take. The thing is, what's the middle ground, Dan? It's the clinch. And the small cage does produce more action. So off first glance, you could be like, oh, Durinho Burns, he's going to need action. He's going to need the opportunities you talked about, Dan. The small cage produces more action, sure. However, even though I was definitely wrong on this call last week, as far as the small cage producing the clinch, it still does have a natural propensity to produce the clinch if you're a young enough and aggressive enough fighter to get into it, which both of these guys are. So for that reason, it's hard to challenge anybody in the king of the clinch department. Kamaru Usman is just so good there, whether he wants to take guys down or he just wants to work them over. I think we could get kind of a boring fight a lot of times when training partners fight together. They know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And I don't want to deflate people because this is like the fight we're all looking forward. But Dan, I think this is one that goes long in the clinch, and I think Kamaru Usman gets his hand raised at the end of it.
Yeah, I definitely got to favor Usman, no doubt about it. There's some questions about, is Gilbert Durinho a brand new man at 170 pounds? Because if we judge based off some of those 55-pound fights, well, the guys that push the high paces, they give him fits, man. I mean, listen, I don't have proof that Gilbert Durinho can go 5 rounds hard. And, before someone's like, what do you mean? His last fight, he went 5 rounds against Woodley. Guys, Kamaru Usman is not, old ass Tyron Woodley backing himself into the fence, throwing one punch, per round. This is a guy who's, known for his volume. I think Kamaru Usman is actually one of the most unique champions we've ever had. It's just maybe, since he doesn't stand and bang every single fight, people don't give him the respect he deserves. But he's extremely well-rounded. He's got the volume style boxing. Obviously, you know about the wrestling, Dan Tom. The submission defense is on point. I mean, he got submitted in 2013. That was damn near 8 years ago, Dan Tom. I mean, a lot of shit's changed in 8 days, 8 months, let alone 8 years, 8 hours. So, I mean, it's just like, I wouldn't even bring that. Like, if we're going to bring that up, then you better bring up all the losses Durinho had at 155 pounds, where when the fights got extended, he didn't look the best. I mean, you remember the Rashid Magomedov fight in Brazil. I know Dan Tom
Mhm.
remembers that. The Dan Hooker fight, which wasn't a matter of getting extended, but he got touched and he didn't like it. And I respect the performance he put on against Woodley, but it's like when there's no resistance whatsoever, when nothing's coming back at you, I don't feel like it gives you an accurate depiction of what he brings to the table. And that's not to discredit him at all. I know he's a top 5 guy, but right now we're talking about, is he a champion? I know he's top 5. Is he a champion, though? That's a completely different question. That's why we got to bring up all these factors. Whereas you could say, well, Usman fought Woodley as well. Yeah, but I have proof he can land over 100 strikes in other fights too. The RDA fight, the Colby Covington fight, which he landed even more than he landed against Woodley. So I know Usman can push a hectic pace. And I think that if he doesn't get finished along the way, that he's winning this fight, Dan Tom. So I got to go and still. I mean, I guess, he does have a lot of injuries and this and that. So one day, the bottom's going to fall out and it's going to be a devastating finish when he loses. I don't think that anybody in the welterweight division is going to just outwork Kamaru Usman. I think that the guy that dethrones him, whether it's Gilbert Burns or someone else, is going to have to knock him out or choke him out, Dan Tom.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the injuries too, because that's something that I perhaps maybe fueled me to take a shot against him. The one time I did, I think I don't even know if I played it, but I definitely picked against him against Colby because you had the wrestling, the pace, right, to kind of answer those questions. And boy, did Kamaru Usman answer those questions emphatically. But part of it was the injury thing, right? You look at his knees. You've heard him admit himself that he can't run. There's deterioration there. But, Dan, I even went back to watch early footage of before he was in the UFC. And he's like helping coach guys. And a lot of times, I don't know if you do this, Dan, we do your social media studies, but if there's an older fighter, there's rumor of an injury, and he's never like rocking the knee pads before, but in every training photo, he's got extra knee pads on one side. That worries me, right? And Usman does that. However, he's always done that. So, he's done it for like, going back to 8 or 10 years now. So it's like, I think he's just one of those dudes who figured out how to wrestle on a bum leg. And he just makes it a part of his game. And his game is he doesn't throw himself out of crazy position. He's not throwing crazy kicks. So you kind of could see he's built around his style around it to where if you're going to fade, him because of that somewhere else, I think.
Yeah, and also he's doing this camp in Colorado. So the guy already pushed a ridiculous pace. I want to see if now in the elevation, if he can even take it to another level. Is that even possible? So let's just see if that has any impact whatsoever on his approach. And then there's also the question of if he comes out a little bit, not gun shy per se, but, a little bit more respectful of his opponent. He knows this guy really well. Maybe, we know about Durinho, allegedly submitting him in the gym. What if Durinho knocked him out in the gym before too? What if there's a little bit of hesitancy there? So I cannot wait, Dan Tom, but since I do not know any of the gym stuff and, you brought up that bro code, that gym code, I'm glad to see it still in effect too, because you do see some of these younger guys talking about knocking people out in the gym. And I know old school guys like Dan Tom are like, look, yeah, we do have respect for shit talk, but like, come on, man, like certain things got to stay in the gym. So
Yep.
I feel where you're coming from on that. I'll go with Usman, but look, if this is Gilbert Burns' time, then it's his time. I mean, I'm definitely curious to see if he can make something out of it. I'm not sitting here saying that Kamaru should be a bigger favorite. I'm not going to disrespect Dorino. I just, based off what I've seen, I got to go with Usman pushing a higher pace. But let's leave it to Dorino to prove me wrong.
I agree. And the last thing I will add, even though I discredit the legs, I still do think that calf kicks on the feet and leg locks on the ground will be the things to watch for if you're a Burns supporter. Good luck there. But I, like you, Dan, have to pick Usman as well.
Now, Dan Tom, the co-main event of the evening, we got Macy Barber, her return. She's taking out Alexa Grasso. And this actually reminds me of a co-main event fight that happened not too long ago. Maybe, slightly lower ranked, but a different version of Jessica Andrade versus Caitlin Chukagian. I mean, you got the power puncher and Macy Barber, the power puncher, Jessica Andrade taking on the person who's going to throw the straight punches in Alexa Grasso or Caitlin Chukagian in that example I made. So I think it's power versus, I don't want to say technique because that disrespects Macy Barber, but it's the straight punches versus the looping punches. And if this was the guy in any of the guy divisions, most of the time I take the straight punches, but in the women's divisions, like we've talked about many times, power counts for a lot because not a lot of these girls are coming out here knocking people out. And Macy Barber knocks people out. she had a 3 fight knockout streak in the UFC. Like, is that unheard of? I mean, has anyone else in that division or any women's division besides maybe Amanda had, a 3 fight knockout streak? Like, cause that that gets my attention, Dan Tom.
That's a really good comparison there. From start to the one that you ended off with. And I could definitely see that angle. However, even though I didn't necessarily come across with that comparison, I do like what you say about power, because that is the big X factor here for Macy Barber. Now, initially, I thought maybe because of the small cage and Macy Barber from her Contender Series debut, and maybe some of the glimpses that we got in LFA, using her size, especially at the strawweight when she was fighting down there, to bully girls against the fence in the clinch. When she gets on top, she's got nasty elbows, right? Uh, you tend to like that. However, the public kind of like the other side. They like the original dog here, which was Grasso, who is now the favorite. She got bet that way to the public. To peel back the curtain, Dan asked me, as I said, I feel like I'm a little nervous because it's another card where the line movement might be dictating some of the shots that I take here. And Dan asked me which ones, and I shared him one matchup, but another matchup was this one, because even though my official pick that I submitted to Junkie Staff Picks was Grasso, and I'm probably going to stick to that here, spoiler alert, I feel like this is one of those fights where if you're looking to bet it, it's either plus money or step away. It's one of those fights where this could be very volatile. It could be a classic. Who have you fought lately? Barber, has not fought in the pandemic era, although she has fought in that Apex octagon, and the smaller octagon, again, you could argue favors her style. However, Grasso didn't look out of sorts there either. She was able to comfortably sidestep and not get run into the cage. However, here's the thing that I look for is that Grasso has improved her ground game, and I believe her when she says that. And another reason why I'm going to stick to the Grasso pick is because even though Barber's been working with Askren, and she kind of has that stereotype for being a top player, she doesn't have the greatest takedowns, much less against the cage. She doesn't have much there. Her 2 takedowns really in her UFC fights were counters off of the clinch, which were more like karate style sweeps, which are awesome. I'm a karate style person. So is she. She's a 2nd degree black belt there, but that doesn't tell me much about her wrestling. That doesn't tell me much about her cage wrestling, and you really need that against Grasso. Grasso has seen it. She's not going to be deterred. And even though I'm more of an X's and O's guy, especially in this pandemic era, I'm really trying to pay attention more toward interviews. And there's been some really good interviews lately. And I was listening to Chiesa talk and him saying about how he wanted the toughest guy. And he asked Joe Silva for Jorge Masvidal because no one's asking for Masvidal. And if you remember, Chiesa actually drops Masvidal and does really well in the beginning of the fight. Like, he had no business doing well against Masvidal. And he's doing well to his credit. But it wasn't Masvidal's success so much that turned the point. Michael Chiesa admitted himself that he's like, I'm mentally broke because I saw, this tough, Latin warrior guy just staring back at me undeterred. And a lot of those fighters that depend on confidence, it's their greatest strength, but it can also be their greatest weakness if they don't have that. Barber did show some toughness that should not be overlooked when she was injured to Barber. However, man, is that ego super inflated, as it is with a young person. They don't have experience. They don't know, but she has that poise that's getting her to this position. I am not a hater, Dan, but at the same time, boy, does that octagon answer some real questions. And those Mexican fighters, you know how I feel. I love my Mexican warriors, men and women. They're very tough, and I feel like you're going to need that Tatiana Suarez level ground wrestling and submission edge to get a girl like Grasso out of there. I don't think she's going to be able to get Grasso out of there. Could Barber win? I think she could, but I think it's going to have to be on the feet, Dan, and I think it's going to have to be with a left hand. Grasso, I don't know if it's her guard. I think it's something that I talk about often. So a lot of fighters, they have a better radar for the power hand and not so much the lead hand, or sometimes it's the opposite. More often, though, they're worried about the big right and they're getting tagged with the left. Sometimes you see Grasso, that happen to her. Barber has got a really good left hand, and she can fight from a southpaw stance, which she will probably do. She likes to fight like a lot of karate people. Thompson and Machida, they prefer the open stance. That's what Barber's probably going to look for, and that's what worries me is because Alexa Grasso, going back to her Invicta days, I looked at every matchup, Dan, she has not fought a southpaw. There's not a lot of southpaws, if any, at that Lobos camp. And when we saw Aldana have to answer, you want to bring in fighter references, when she had to answer the southpaw question to Holly Holm, we saw, and that could be on Aldana. I don't want to say that's, poor on her coaches, but we saw poor prep. She was just chasing the southpaw the whole time. She wasn't cutting off the cage. It was like, did you even train for a southpaw? So I'm kind of worried with that camp when it comes to Southpaw, Dan. So I'm going to pick Grasso here. Long-winded, I'm sorry. They actually did a decent tape on this fight. I'm going to pick Grasso here, but I'm not confident in it, and I think this fight goes long.
Yeah. Listen, Grasso does have a nice point fighting style. Her hands are pretty damn good. But I think that some of her Invicta fights were super exciting, and it kind of pushed her to a point. You know, she has a country on her back, and it kind of got her not unnecessarily hyped because, you know, she's got the style, she's got the look, but I think people overvalue her a lot, and they've been doing this since day one. And I mean, I don't necessarily agree that you got to be Tatiana Suarez to take her down to finish her. I mean, I saw Felice Herrig, for Christ's sake, coming out here taking her down twice, bullying her standing as well. I saw Randa Marcos take her down 4 times. Now those ladies couldn't finish. It was Tatiana that got the finish, but that's where that power comes in that we were talking about with Macy Barber. She has a unique power for that weight class, and Alexa Grasso is there to be hit, including her last fight at 125 pounds against Kim. I thought she got hit a lot, and I don't think you want to get hit against Macy Barber. So I agree with you about the ego thing. That's definitely, you know, saying she's going to be the youngest champion in UFC history. That was a bit of an ego thing. I mean, it's good to, you know, sky's the limit, right? It's good to like push it and try to be your best self. I get that, but you know, I didn't like the fact that after that Modafferi fight, you know, she's trying to get on the mic, and it was very cringe. But we all make mistakes, Dan Tom. It's been a year since then. I think she's matured, and I think she's gonna knock out Alexa Grasso. So I'm going with Macy Barber for the upset here. Vegas said -130. Macy Barber on the open. All the public came in on Grasso. I disagree with the public. I'm going Macy Barber. I think her power makes the difference, Dan Tom.
Yeah, as far as betting goes, like I said, the values of the dog here. That's another reason why I'm kind of hating my pick as it's coming out, because Grasso was initially the dog. And I will say that with the Tatiana Suarez thing, I said you got to be Tatiana Suarez level wrestling and submissions to finish her, not to take her down. Because if you want to bring up Felice Herrig, even as status as she is, she's still a much more proven clinch wrestler than Macy Barber. That's a fact. So I still believe that my statement holds up there. Does that mean Grasso is going to win? No. Does that mean she can't get finished by a left hand? Possibly not. I mean, we've seen Barber get standing finishes, which, by the way, I'm a fan of. I would like to see more of in MMA. So y'all better stop hating on those standing stoppages. But that being said, again, a female, this weight class, a Mexican fighter, one who's never been stopped. And when she is in war, she's, you know, even if she doesn't have the best answers, she certainly doesn't look like she's questioning herself. I don't know. That's a lot to count on her to get stopped. Could she lose? Absolutely. I think that first round is going to tell a lot. And even if she does win, I still think Grasso is going to have to survive some hell in that first round. So we'll see. I'm also kind of scared of layoffs. So don't follow me off any cliffs. I think that, the value is definitely more on Dan's side of the pick here.
I mean, I'd be more worried about the layoff if she was like, you know, mid 30s. I mean, she's 22, 23. So to me, I mean, don't get me wrong, the human body is the human body. So she had that surgery. No matter what, she had that surgery. But I'm just under the inclination that, similar to, not to compare these two examples, but similar to, remember Ortega popped for steroids early on in his career, and then we often
Yeah, yeah.
we're often worried about, oh, how are they going to come back off the juice? But it's like, well, he's so young that it's not going to be like Vitor Belfort coming back off the juice. It's the guy's still young. Whereas Barber, same thing. She's 22, 23. So if anything, I think we see a better version of her. But let's
For
find
sure.
out Saturday
Yeah.
night, right?
Yep.
Featured bout in the middleweight division. We got Kelvin Gastelum taking on Ian Heinisch. And man, this is talk about a high risk, low reward, fight for Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, all the pressure's on him, Dan Tom. You see what the line is right now? It's I'll tell you in a second. It's -230 for Kelvin Gastelum, coming off 3 straight L's. Ian Heinisch has nothing to lose here. I mean, this is Ian Heinisch. If you lose to Gastelum, no big deal. You're supposed to lose to him. He's ranked ahead of you. But if Ian Heinisch can come out here and get this upset, I mean, that's going to change the entire trajectory of his mixed martial arts career, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man. I mean, you want to talk about the risk reward too. I think the line kind of reflects that too, right? You're I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's matchups like this every week, right, Dan? Where you're like, I like this guy as a person. I agree that he should be favored and probably win this fight, but this is not a guy, maybe or not a guy, at least not in this matchup, to be over 2-1 odds as a favorite. And I kind of get those feelings from Gastelum here, especially after he dropped the ball, which he admitted himself, obviously, against Hermanson his last time out, and that's taking nothing away from Hermanson or his ground game, by the way. Leg locks obviously need to be respected. I believe Hermanson that he's good at them, right? But at the same time, Gastelum definitely dropped the ball. One thing I did forget though is and he seemed to get back on track pretty fast here and showing some good signs in his social media. It's hard to see with Kelvin until he steps in the scales, right? Wears a lot of t-shirts, t-shirt in the pool type division kind of guy. But when you looked at him on the scales in his last fight, Dan, you could tell a difference. He looked really good. He maybe he's just done. He wants to really fill out that physique at middleweight. I don't know what it is, but I think that's worth leaving room to be surprised for. Whereas Heinisch, shout out to our guy James Lynch, did a really good interview with him. I was reading or listening to, and he's kind of been jumping around again. He didn't finish things out and doesn't look like he'll be going back with our guy. Shout out to Eric Nixick there at Extreme Couture, though he does credit that time in Vegas. Whereas he's staying up more in the Midwest area. And, we'll see. Not as much, he's been working Factory X, obviously. He likes to make the trek down there. Obviously, I love Coach Montoya, and they do a really good job there. So it'll be interesting. He did say he has some southpaws to train with because, Ian Heinisch, by the way, he's 2-2 against UFC level southpaws. If we want to count Justin Sumter in the Contender Series, sure, he's 3-2. However, those two losses is a submission loss to Marcus Perez and LFA, one of my favorite submissions, not trying to hate, but that definitely does not age well. And the other, I believe, was to the other southpaw, and he beat Fajeda, he beat Mearshart. Who did he lose to off the top of my head? I apologize. Omari wasn't a southpaw, though, was he? I know Omari can fight and he'll switch.
But, Omari and Maluka.
Brunson. It was Brunson. There we go. Great job, Brunson. And again, Brunson's on a bit of a resurgence. So it's really difficult. You want to look for guys that are going to try to grapple and tire themselves out to grapple against Heinisch. But I don't think we're going to get that here against Gastelum. You may get some, suspicious choices from Gastelum, but his chin has still been able to hold up. So I think it's still going to take another perfect right hand to put him out. So on the decision or submission front, I'll still side with Kelvin Gastelum to win this fight here. Apologies for the long-winded breakdown, but I do see this going long. I don't know how committed I am to it, and I haven't seen what the over-under totals are.
Yeah, I got to see what Kelvin looks like in this fight. I mean, I thought he actually looked good in the Hermanson fight for as long as it lasted. I know it was a short fight, but, Ian Heinisch isn't about to come out here and leg lock him. It's just about, Kelvin coming out here still feeling confident and still believing in himself and letting things go because he's got faster hands than Ian. I think he's got more one-punch knockout power. He's a southpaw with a devastating body kick. His wrestling ability is on point too. It's just that, is he at a point now where, it's catching up to him that he's kind of the smaller guy at 185 pounds? There's a lot of his wins where, not to discredit them, they're all against legends, but that being said, legends that are kind of, getting up there in age, whether it's Jacare, whether it's Bisping, whether it's Vitor Belfort. So now he's taking on a young, hungry guy. And one thing about Heinisch, he can push the pace. He's got very nice footwork, or he's got not very nice footwork. He's got very unique footwork, switching his stances a lot, kind of herky-jerky, but he's unique to himself. So I like what he brings to the table. And you start to slow down on a guy like Ian Heinisch, and he will absolutely tee off on you. He's willing to dig deep. So I like what he brings to the table. I definitely think there's levels to this. So I got to pick Kelvin Gastelum as, the rightful favorite, as my pure pick. I'm just curious if this turns out to be a dog or pass situation. Kelvin's definitely better than Heinisch. No questions asked, but is he still into this shit anymore? I know he's only 29, so let's not write him off because maybe he comes out here, knocks Heinisch out. But I want to see that same hungry Kelvin that we used to see, the guy that fought Tim Kennedy, the guy that fought Rick Story back in the day. I want to see that same hungry Kelvin Gastelum. And if some version of that shows up, I think he should win this, Dan Tom, but it might be closer than the line indicates.
I agree with you there. And lastly, I'll just parlay your own theory back at you because I like it. And I think it could apply here is that no matter what the adversity, steroid test, injury, loss of focus, These fighters deal with crazy things, like Dustin Poirier, everyone's talking about his calf kick, but the thing is he couldn't throw kicks forever after his fight with Jim Miller, and Jim Miller would share that with him. And like, you go through these stints of these guys' career, and you look back and you have the information. You're like, wow, if I knew that, I wouldn't have been speculating like an idiot, betting one way, betting the other, thinking one thing, thinking the other. We can be on so many things. Really, the fighters go through a lot, and when they're young, like Dan said, they at least have time on their side to work through these things. And I think Kelvin definitely has that here. Whereas Heinisch, I think like even if he were trying to make it ugly in the clinch, like Darren Till did when he upset Gastelum the last time Gastelum was supposed to win a fight like this in middleweight, right? And we're in the small cage again. Oh, the clinch could pop up. I love Factory X, love Mark Montoya, but Dan, I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm not saying it like it's bulletproof, but name any of their fighters from 35 to middleweight who have won, look good, or are known for their clinch work against the fence. Name one. Name one fighter who's used that technique, just even win one of their fights. It doesn't seem to be in their playbook very strongly. That's what I'm saying.
So next up, we have an 140-pound catchweight between two exciting strikers. We got the boxer Andre Ewell taking on the devastating kicker Chris Gutierrez. And a couple things to point out: Andre Ewell has an 8-inch reach advantage. Andre Ewell is also a southpaw, Dan Tom, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, orthodox fighters can kick the calves of southpaw fighters, but if you're expecting this to be like the Vince Morales fight, I think you might be in for a bit of a surprise that Gutierrez is not going to be able to get off on the calf kicks as easily as he was in that fight.
Yeah, that's the thing. You go back. I think you got to go back to maybe like Gerard Sanders, who obviously is like more of a do or die wrestler. That might be the only like UFC level southpaw that I see on his list. I think Bendy might be a southpaw too, but obviously Bendy Casimir is a submission guy. But that being said, obviously no wrestlers, no submission threats from Andre Ewell. This is a striking match with a southpaw. Man, people must think I hate Andre Ewell because I always pick against him. But I'm telling you, whether it's Sean O'Malley getting injured, Montel Jackson's gas tank fading, when I see guys that are super long and skinny and they're not really making hay or have like a ton of well-rounded promise to really back it up, I get worried for those guys. I start hearing a tick 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 as I look at my watch, because it's just a matter of time before they get pushed out of the weight division. Certain cases. I believe Ewell is one of those guys. It's weird. He looks like he's getting bigger, which he should be. So these cuts have to be getting harder. However, he is fighting a bit smarter. His takedown defense is getting better. Like, you got to credit him on these improvements. However, he's not going to be defending takedowns here. And Gutierrez, he is my pick here. And as much as I like the guy, he's not like a pace guy. So I'm not picking him to like necessarily like Andre Ewell out. However, in one of the decisions, I know some people are with me, some people are against me. I don't care less. But I always reference Jonathan Martinez, the Andre Ewell fight. Because it's just great. It's Muay Thai, it's body work, it's leg work, it's all the things that judges are freaking idiots about and don't score enough of. And you see that come to light where Jonathan Martinez, who is a very similar guy, he's not going to beat you by outpacing you like Gutierrez. He's going to rely and sit on his technique. Also a Factory X guy. So again, this camp is very familiar with Andre Ewell. Again, I'm not. I give credit where credit's due, and I throw suspicion where suspicion, is warranted. But hey, Factory X, they've seen this guy before, and I feel like even though they've 0-1 against him, they can game plan against him fine. The calf kicks may not be there as much, but for a good kicker, you could argue that it's almost worse because those inside kicks, it's more power to kind of come through. And I think Gutierrez can do that. And I know Gutierrez can go to the body. And what I do know is that Andre Ewell, from his body and his leg defense, is definitely the porous for his striking style, his stance, his length. It's going to open up those things naturally. I feel like Gutierrez, even if, which is kind of to his detriment, why his fights are close and they shouldn't be. I feel like Gutierrez can win this even without an overwhelming pace, even though his pace can make fights closer than they should be. That's a fair criticism on Gutierrez. But dude, just seeing what a good Muay Thai kicker can do to this guy, I think the judges are going to be your worst enemy here. And if Andre Ewell tries to change things and score some, point scoring takedowns, Chris Gutierrez showed some really impressive takedown defense against your guy Cody Durden there. I know he got dominated in the first round, but if you look at rounds 2 and 3, like, dude, Chris Gutierrez is doing some high level stuff. And Cody Durden, obviously, like you gave us a tip off to, better than most people realize. So Don't sleep on that performance. I'm going to go with Chris Gutierrez here, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see where this line moves.
I actually do think that Uhl's been making improvements. If you look at the numbers for every single fight, he's increased his strike output every single fight he's had, from 53 strikes against Barral in Brazil to 73 against Anderson Dos Santos to 80 against Martinez to 123 against Erwin Rivera. So that's important. He's getting more comfortable inside the octagon. His takedown defense is getting better, but he's not going to have to worry about that here against Gutierrez. And the Martinez fight, despite who we might have scored it for, I think Martinez presents a different challenge. I think that was southpaw versus southpaw, whereas this is orthodox versus southpaw. So I kind of see this being a case where Gutierrez probably lands the harder shots, but Andre kind of doubles him up on output. So it's like, which do the judges prefer? Chris Lee might have it for Gutierrez, but Jaron Villel might have it for Uhl. So it's just about two judges seeing the fight, similarly, and do they favor the power or do they favor the output? I'll go with the output just because he's the dog here. And look, I like Gutierrez. Don't get me wrong. Bet him against Vince Morales pretty damn confidently, but he was like minus 110 there. Why was he a pick 'em with Vince Morales? Like, he should have been like minus 2 something there against Vince Morales. Yeah. Whereas here, this is the fight that I think should be the minus 110. So I'll go with Uhl to kind of double him up on strikes and win another split decision. So let's see who the judges favor in this one.
Fair point. Could be sweaty on both sides. Very fair point, my friend.
So kicking off the main card, we got Coconut Bombs versus the Cuban Missile Crisis. We got Mackie Pitolo taking on Julian Marquez. And Dan, Tom, I have a feeling I know why Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby put this first fight on the pay-per-view. I mean, these two are going to stand and bang until one man falls. There's a good chance this is going to end via knockout. This is going to end via submission. If it does go all 3 rounds, it's going to be fight of the night. This is going to be a very exciting brawl while it lasts. I'm a big fan of Mackie Pitolo. I definitely like his style. The thing I'm worried about for him here is that size of Julian Marquez kind of wearing on Mackie Pitolo in this spot. And then also, obviously, Julian hits like an absolute truck. But I do think Mackie's going to have some success. I think he's got crisper hands than Julian. I think he's got better output. It's just the thing I'm worried about is I know he's going to give it. It's how is he going to take it is what I'm most worried about here with this guy Marquez. Because one thing about him, man, that dude is a dog. And he actually has a pretty underrated ground game to go along with it. But as far as the stand-up part of things is concerned, you don't want to eat one of those clean on the chin, Dan Tom.
I'm glad you mentioned that underrated ground game. I mean, do you see that Kimura trap that he hit on DiCirico in the fight? I know he lost a split in the small cage. Both these guys have a lot of experience in the small cage, by the way. But Marquez is legit. I got to say, I have bias on both sides of this fight. You guys think probably I'm going to go with a Hawaiian from Extreme Couture because my boy Eric Nixick's going to be in the corner. And my heart's always going to be rooting for that combination. However, not because I don't have a personal connection to Maki, but because I'm looking at this from the X's and O's. I'm a big fan of Maki. I made plays on him before. I've been wrong on him backing this guy. Believe me, I like Maki, okay? However, I am going to officially pick against my guys, so to speak, again, showing, hey, I can step aside from my bias, folks. And I'm going to pick Marquez, but there's bias on the Marquez side too. Full disclosure, I mean, this is the guy I've hung out with and watched fights before, done his show, went on and done his show. I know this guy, and he's a legit good dude. So it's hard for me to break this down unbiasedly, Dan. That being said, I do have some opinions on both sides of it. I don't blame anybody taking the underdog shot. I do believe that middleweight is still, we're questioning undersized middleweights in Gastelum, and I get it. I get it in this case too, doubly so. That being said, I don't actually hate Mackie Pitolo at this weight. I do think that he needs to work on his submission defense if he's, getting submitted by guys like Darren Stewart. And I think that submission is actually super alive here because both guys are really tough. Their chins are, they'll take a shot, and even if they're rocked, they'll keep going. Obviously, Pitolo can be put out cold, but obviously Pitolo can also take shots better at middleweight, which is, again, why I like him here. So it's not that neither guy couldn't knock the other guy out. Like, if Pitolo knocks Marquez out, it shouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world, and obviously vice versa. I don't know what the line is. I got to imagine it's closing near to even or open, not too far off of that. Maybe, who knows? Maybe you're still getting some decent plus money if you're looking for like a Marquez angle for inside the distance, which I don't hate. But if you're like a prop sprinkle, not to your style, maybe a Marquez by submission is actually worth a sprinkle here. Or if you're backing the dog and you want a little bit of a sprinkle hedge or whatever, if that's your style, not my style, but I know a lot of people play that way. Those are kind of points you might want to maybe glance at. I'm going to officially pick Marquez though here.
Yeah, I kind of also thought that the submission might have been live for Marquez. Maybe, hurt him with a punch, or I know that, and then get him to shoot. Obviously, I know that Pitolo has some decent underrated wrestling, offensively speaking. So he might shoot for something, leave his neck out. I could also see the Pitolo knockout happening. We've seen Marquez rocked before. We've seen him wobbled as well. So I could see a finish on either side. And I agree with you about Pitolo. His right weight class is 185. It's just, he's fighting one of the bigger men at 185. He's not fighting, a smaller guy. So I think it's all matchup dependent with Pitolo. And I'm going to be rooting for him. Look, I'm a fan of Mackie. I'm a fan of both guys. Don't get me wrong. But, coconut bombs. You want to see the guy do well. He's on a 2-fight skid. So I want to kind of see him get back on track. And I just love his style. But my gut says Marquez. I know he's coming off a massive layoff, so he might actually look like shit here. And I know he gasses out even when he's not coming off a layoff, but something about that size, that power kind of wearing on Pitolo as the fight goes on. I'm going to lean Marquez, but we'll see what happens. It's not the most confident pick, that Tom.
Yeah, same here, but I think the Darren Stewart is the link. Unfortunately for Pitolo, this could look like the Darren Stewart fight for both of them, is my prediction.
Yeah, and that was an interesting fight. I mean, these guys gas when they fight Marquez, man. He wears on them. He's like a big grizzly bear in there, man. So someone's gonna have to knock him out to beat him. I know he just lost a decision, but like Alessio had to go through some shit to win that decision. And
and Marquez had like one arm half the fight.
Right.
To his shoulder. He had one arm half the fight and he still fucking came at him.
Yeah. Let's see how they look. I'm excited. So Dan, Tom, last but not least, we got a battle of two vets. We got Bobby Green taking on Jim Miller. They were actually supposed to fight back in the day. Bobby Green had to pull out. Jim Miller ends up fighting Yancy Medeiros. He finishes him in the first round. I was actually going to bet Bobby the first time because the first time he was going to be the underdog against Jim Miller, and he was kind of the unknown guy. I cashed him against Josh Thompson at plus 250 odds, and been a big fan of Bobby Green ever since. You remember when he finished Volkman, and Dana was like, if you want to get paid in the UFC, be like Bobby Green. I know you remember when he said that. So nothing but respect for Bobby Green and Jim Miller. Jim Miller, most fights in UFC history. I mean, such a legend. Love that guy. Really, to me, it comes down to the same thing every single Jim Miller fight comes down to. Ever since 2016, since he's been dealing that unfortunate condition, he just doesn't have the conditioning to win fights that go past round one. That's just the bottom line. He's going to give it his all in round one, but if he doesn't get you out of there, he's losing the next 2 rounds. Bobby Green is very, very tough to get out of there. The last person to put him out in the first round was the uncrowned champ, Dustin Poirier. Listen, man, I think that the first round's going to be close, and I think Bobby's going to win the second and third. You look at the numbers, I mean, Bobby more than doubles him up on strikes as well. So, don't get caught with a head kick. I know he likes to fight with his hands down. I know a lot of people are actually holding it against Bobby that he lost his last fight to Moises, but like Jim Miller isn't some 24-year-old kid who's making huge improvements every single fight like Moises is. We knew Moises was good. It was just a matter of him actually, showing up mentally, being confident, believing in himself. We knew he kicks very hard. We knew he's got a very good ground game too. It's just about showing up. I thought he showed up against Bobby Green, despite who you scored it for. But I don't think this is going to be one of those gritty wars that comes down to the wire where you're questioning who won. I think maybe the first round you question who won, but second and third are going to Bobby. So I'm going Bobby Green via unanimous decision here.
Man, they lose Munoz versus Rivera, one of the best cards. And what do we do in Line Movement? We come with you with 2 matchups instead. We give you Gutierrez, Ewell, and we give you the official replacement, which is Green Miller. However, I got to cut that short because I'm dying on the inside, Dan. I hate this fight. You know me, man. I love lightweight. I love Jim Miller. And I love me some Bobby Green. But I hate lightweight because they always make my favorites fight each other, man. And this is a terrible matchup that really doesn't do much for either of them. You could say that it's two veteran guys, but I feel like Bobby Green, if he fights right and has his head right, is still competitive and athletic enough to compete with the Young Bucks. Whereas athleticism is the key word, because even though I don't give Moises enough credit, and I was wrong on that Bobby Green one, I took a hit on that. It was one of the worst ways possible, because it's the technical guy out technically showing that he's a better fighter. But then the younger athletic guy just does something young and athletic and wins the fucking round. You don't really got to worry about that with Jim Miller. He's obviously not that young and athletic, explosive phenom guy, right? He's got the suspect tank like an explosive phenom, but he doesn't unfortunately have that firepower. So you don't got to worry about that here. I lost big on Bobby Green that time. I hate this fight, and I don't want to put money against Jim Miller. So take that for what you will. But with that being said, I could see Bobby Green being one of the more dependable parlay pieces, because it's not just his condition or the X's and O's when it comes to Jim Miller. It's that, like, you got to make sure that the condition and like all the planets are aligned, and he has to have like a good camp. And for whatever reason, the UFC matchmakers, and I'm editorializing, but this is based on stuff Jim Miller said himself, they're giving him the Joe Silva treatment without the Joe Silva respect. And I know Joe Silva's a hard ass to most people when you just hear bad stories, and that's probably all true. But even Joe Silva, you know, he gave up the fucking respect to Jim Miller when he booked Jim Miller versus Dustin Poirier, a match that, you know, I was, that's so bad. Jim Miller's going to get knocked out in that matchup, and he ends up taking Poirier to a majority. And in the commentary walkout, he said this was one of Joe Silva's last matchmaking assignments before he left the UFC. And he gave Jim Miller Dustin Poirier last minute, and Jim Miller said yes. And Joe Silva said, "Of course you said yes. You're Jim fucking Miller." And I don't feel like the matchmakers are giving him the last part, because this is about the third camp in a row. And I know it's pandemic era, but this is about the third fight in a row where he was offered the fight in less than 3 weeks. For a dude who the UFC in its golden era, whether they were selling Lesnar, Rousey, McGregor, this motherfucker was on the undercard, fucking breaking his back, giving you guys Lozon versus Miller classics at UFC 155 during the Kane fucking JDS trilogy, John Anik making his commentary debut. Jim Miller was fucking there. And to see him just getting that disrespect, and he can't even get a camp because they know that this is the guy that's going to say yes, that pisses me off, man. And then they're going to give him a matchup that's just terrible stylistically for him. Terrible. It's a bad stylistic matchup. Jim Miller, if he's smart, he's going to go for some calf kicks early, but Bobby Green's going to pick up on it. He's going to switch his stance. He's going to shoot shots down the middle. And Bobby Green, because none of you motherfuckers give him any respect for his wrestling, and probably won't because he got beat by Moises, even though it was him engaging when he shouldn't have been. It wasn't because he was really getting taken down or out-wrestled, so to speak. The dude's got good wrestling, and I shout it from the roofs every fucking time and get no credit for it, and neither does Green, but that's cool. Green's probably going to roll here, and I'm going to be very sad.
Yeah, I mean, look, we agree on the pick. I think I see it a little bit differently, you know, from the matchmaker's point of view. I kind of like, because to me, I'm kind of happy for Jim Miller. It's like, hey, Jim, you want to make 6 figures in 3 weeks and extend your record for most fights in UFC history? So to me, I think Jim's chilling. I mean, do you want to make 6 figures in 3 weeks or not? So, I mean, it's not like they put him in there with, you know, Damir Ismagulov or some young killer. They put him in there with another guy who's towards, you know, the latter part. I agree stylistically. I mean, there's a reason I picked Bobby, doubles him up on output, but I mean, they were supposed to fight once in the past.
That's true.
It's like
they were supposed to.
It's like at some point, you know, it's tough because I feel where you're coming from, but I also like what should they do, you know, with Jim Miller? I mean, if he's like, man, let me fight on 2 weeks notice. I'm just, you know, I'm stacking up these paychecks, extending the record for, you know, most fights in UFC history. And some of these fights he's going to come out here and win. I don't think this is one of them, but I don't, right. I also don't really think he's going to get like really hurt in this fight either.
That is true. They're not like Yair BJing him, right?
Exactly. You know, if they were doing like, you know, who's one of these, let me pull up the rankings real quick so I can see who the young stuff. Like if they were doing the Benny versus Jim Miller rematch, then I'd be like, dude, like what the fuck, you know what I mean? And they do that on 3 weeks. Yeah. Then we're like, guys, stop. You know, it's not like they're doing Islam Makhachev versus Jim Miller, or, you know, something like that. Then I'd be like, guys, on 3 weeks, like, come on, I don't care if it's 100K, but to fight another, you know, I mean, these are mini legends to guys like us. You know what I mean? Like the casuals might not know them, but hardcore fans, these guys are legends. So let them, have a nice paycheck with Bobby Green, and I think they'll put on an exciting fight.
Very true. I'm going to wish for the best here. I like your optimism, Dan. I'm hoping you're right.
Thank you, my friend. So let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Dan Tom, it's always a pleasure talking fights with you, my man. The fans can follow you at Dan Tom MMA. They can follow me at Best Fight Picks. You can follow Line Movement at line_movement. Make sure y'all give this video a like and a subscribe. We're also available on Apple Podcasts, so make sure y'all subscribe to Line Movement. Give us a 5-star review. And there's all kinds of Line Movement podcasts on iTunes, whether it's myself and Dan Tom, whether it's my boy the Kipper, whether it's James Lynch. So make sure y'all subscribe to all the stuff Line Movement got going on. Thanks to everybody behind the scenes, our producer Jordan, Joe, Dan, James, Brian, Nick, everybody. Thank you guys very, very much. As well as the fans. Without you, none of this would be possible. So thank you, fans. We'll be back next week. There's another card for the next 7 weeks. So you guys are stuck with us, and I look forward to it. So everybody enjoy the fights, stay safe, and we will speak soon.
What's up, everybody? If you enjoyed the video you just saw, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe down below to everything linemovement.com.